Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by Blue Nile. Make your moments sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. Locked On MLB listeners will get $50 off of any purchase of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings, so use promo code Locked On at checkout. And now let's get going. It's time for your July 4th edition of Locked MLB.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan, and you can tell by my lower third, which should be appearing anytime now. There it is. Feel free to call me Sully. Thanks so much for making it your first listen, as we're available on all your free podcasting catchers. On today's episode, we will be talking about the fact that not every team is playing on the 4th of July, and that's ridiculous. In fact, I have a proposal for what to do on the 3 days where not only every team should be playing one game, every team should be playing 2 games. Trust me, Commissioner Sully has his hat on. Also, I take a look at the fact that there are several pitchers who are going to be returning and make a gigantic impact on the potential for one team to make it to the World Series, and 3 other names that are floating out there that if you're an American League team and you want to see a team other than New York or Houston playing in the World Series, you better grab one of these, because the key to topping the Yankees or the Astros is to outpitch them, because you're not going to out-hit them. Hey, you can follow us at Locked On MLB Pods for Instagram and for Twitter. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. I'm recording this on the morning of the 4th of July. I did the July 3rd episode with my good buddy Millard, and we talked about some of the state of the game and everything. There are games going on right now. In fact, as I'm recording this, the first game of the day has begun. It looks like they're doing one of those early morning games. It could be a Peacock game. I don't know. That's one thing that I'll probably do on. I have talked about this in a previous episode. I will talk about it later on another show. Let's keep the games in one spot. Let's not hide them. Let's not play the cap game. Let's not play the shell game by trying to figure out where baseball games are. If you're trying to gain an audience, making it confusing to find the games is not the way to do it. Put everything on MLB.com. Put the World Series on there. You know, look at just let's go make this as simple as possible. But the Marlins and the Nationals are indeed playing right now as I record this. There's no score in the 3rd. Later on today, you're going to see, and by the time you hear it, a lot of these games will probably be over. Some of you probably not going to be listening to this on Tuesday the 5th. We got the Rangers and the Orioles are playing. Between 2 teams that are better than you think. You know, right now, the Rangers are only a few games under 500. The West stinks this year. There's only one contender, the Astros. The Rangers aren't really contenders, but if they have a better year than you're expecting, well, that's at least a step in the right direction. Same thing going with Baltimore. Baltimore is a little bit of a worse record, but they're not the pushovers they used to be. The Guardians are playing 2. I'm going to get to the concept of playing 2 a little bit later. And the Guardians, who won a dramatic game against the Yankees yesterday with Tristan McKenzie throwing 1 hit over 7 innings against that lineup. The Guardians have the pitching to win the World Series. I'll say it. They just need a couple more decent bats and to win that division. You know, taking 2 against the Tigers will go a long way. Odorizzi is coming back. He's pitching for the Astros against the Royals. The Rays and the Red Sox are playing a key matchup, especially for both those teams. There's only 1 game separates those 2. Now, as I said before, the Toronto, Tampa Bay, and Boston should not be paying attention to the Yankees. They should be paying attention to Cleveland and Minnesota. Be ahead of those 2 teams, and you're going to the playoffs. But when you're going head-to-head, you got to win these games if you want to get your spot in the postseason there. Beeks is pitching for Tampa Bay, which means he'll probably throw a no-hitter. The Brewers and the Cubs, the Brewers are in first place right now. Lauer, who's had not a great season, but he's a fine pitcher. The Brewers are looking to pad their lead in the NL Central. Meanwhile, the Braves and the Cardinals are playing what could be a playoff matchup. Wright and Hudson, that's a really good pitching matchup. The Mets want to build up. I'll talk a lot about the Mets later on. They're playing the Reds and Green. Green is probably going to strike out 17 batters, walk 20, and be brilliant, but still let up 7 runs. I don't understand his career. Walker is pitching for the Mets. Absolutely bizarre matchup as the Giants are playing the D-backs. Rodon, who's have a fine season for the Giants. The Giants are really underachieving this year. I knew they weren't quite the team that won 107 games last year, but they're barely above 500 now. Madison Bumgarner is pitching against the Giants, which is always a strange sentence to say. Bumgarner is a name I'm going to bring up a little bit later. I'm bringing a lot of things up later. I'm just giving us a rundown here. The Padres and the Mariners, 2 teams. One was once managed by Bob Melvin. One is currently managed by Bob Melvin. One is overachieving. The other is underachieving. The one that Melvin is currently managing is overachieving. The White Sox are dusting themselves off if this is a gigantic series for the Chicago White Sox. They don't have a chance to be a wild card team. If they want to have this season not be a disaster and find themselves in the postseason, they're going up against the division-leading Twins. Cueto is pitching against Bundy. This is must win for the White Sox. Must win. This series is must win. They almost have to sweep. But if they win today, they're back to 500 and would be only 1 game back in the loss column of the Twins. The Twins have played several more games or a bunch of games ahead in the win column, but only 1 back in the loss. The White Sox, if they win this series, could really start thinking, yeah, we may not be a lost team. The White Sox think they could be the Braves or the Nationals, where the Nationals had a losing record relatively deep in the 2019 season, and the Braves had a losing record after the trade deadline, and both those teams went on to win the World Series. The Blue Jays and the A's are playing in Oakland, and down the street from me, the Rocks are playing the Dodgers, Urias and Freeland. The Dodgers lost a dramatic game. They let Clayton Kershaw pitched great, which is great news if you're a Dodger fan, but the bullpen fell apart. They let up 4 runs in the 9th to San Diego. Before I get into the concept of some pitchers that I think could be moved around, it is ridiculous that not every team is playing on the 4th of July. Now, I'm not going to get into current events. I'm not getting into the state of whether people want to celebrate the 4th this year or not. It's still the 4th of freaking July. And we have that day off. It's a national holiday here. And the Yankees are not playing. The Yankees are not playing on the 4th of July. One of the biggest moments in the history of baseball took place on the 4th of July involving the Yankees. The Lou Gehrig, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth speech, took place on the 4th of July, 1939. The 4th of freaking July is when Dave Righetti threw that no-hitter against the Red Sox. Tons of great memories for the Yankees, the best team in baseball, in New York on the 4th of July, and they're not playing. They're not playing. The Mets are in Cincinnati. There is no baseball game in New York on the 4th of July. That is insane. Every team, I know not every team is going to be able to play a home game, but, and every team is playing in America, sorry, Jen and Ruth and and AJ and all my Blue Jays fans who listen to me. I think you should play the 4th of July in the United States. But here's what I propose to do. Here's what your pal Sully, if I became the commissioner of baseball, there would be 3 days that not only every team would play, they'd play 2. And they'd be scheduled. There would be Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day. 2 of those are, and you see often, because it's 4th of July is on a Monday this year. Obviously, Memorial Day and Labor Day are always on a Monday. And you see a lot of time, they're having the day off. When everyone's out, that should be a tradition to go see a ball game on Memorial Day, 4th of July. Are they in town? If they're not in town, you have it on the radio as you're doing your cookout, or you're out at the beach, or at the lake, or whatever you're doing on the 4th. This is insane. And you schedule a doubleheader, and you have it be. Look, there were a bunch of things that they did during COVID that I understood why they did during COVID, but I didn't want to see bleed into the regular seasons. I was never for the universal DH. I realized I was screaming against the tides on that one, and I've grown to accept it. I'm still not crazy about it, but I've grown to accept it. And I just wish that if you're going to have a universal DH, that you just realign everything. There's no difference between the American League and the National League. So just I've said this before, create North, South, Central, West, and you create divisions where you have regional rivalries. So if we're going to do it, let's go do it. Okay. Another thing that was from the COVID era, with the COVID year, was Ghost Runner in second. That stinks. It absolutely stinks. But one thing they did that I liked was the 7-inning no-hitter, or the 7-inning doubleheader. The 7-inning doubleheader, you knew you were getting 14 innings of baseball, so you can't say that you got cheated. But it added a little bit of intensity. It added a little bit. We better score this. It's the 5th inning already. We better get going. Now, I don't want all games reduced to 7 innings, but on some special occasions, yeah, we're doing a 7-inning one today. Better get your butt in gear. And if you have it scheduled ahead of time on those 3 days, maybe that will allow to have certain more wiggle room. I don't want to have the season going deep into October. I wouldn't mind reducing the number of games in the schedule anyway, because I think the World Series should be played in early October, not late October. But I digress. But if you say going into the year, we know these 3 days we're playing a 7-inning doubleheader. Why do we keep wanting to say no-hitter? The 7-inning doubleheader on Memorial Day, on the 4th of July, and on Labor Day. Those will be 3 special days. Going into it. And and you know that on those days, you might go in and see a doubleheader. You may be only seeing the first game. You may only see the second game. I don't know how to work it out. Neither do you. I just thought of this the other day. But to have the teams not even playing is just, to me, is an absolute joke. You should see your team play on the 4th of July. That's not crazy. We're trying to create memories here. We're trying to create memories, and great memories. Remember that great 4th of July game we went to? Or remember, I pointed out it wasn't a great memory for me because my team lost, but I do remember sitting at the town pool in Weston, Massachusetts with a radio on, listening to Dave Righetti no-hit the Boston Red Sox on the 4th of July. We could see all of these things. These are all part of the memories we have. It's not all about just winning a ring in October. Sometimes it's about building the memories, including going out and seeing a doubleheader on one of the days we all have off in the summer. And by the way, if you're talking about memories and you're talking about getting a ring, I'm talking about BlueNile.com. Whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone event, find jewelry as unique as the person you love with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple tools that let you find the right diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as the setting size. And Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then handcraft the perfect engagement ring. Each ring is a one-of-a-kind. So make your moments sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On MLB listeners will get $50 off of any purchase of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings. So use code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships for free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece at BlueNile.com today. Use promo code Locked On. Okay. I do want to talk about this because it really does look like the American League may be heading to an inevitable showdown between the Astros and the Yankees. Now, there are opportunities to see a team upset someone along the way. We've seen that many, many times. The most obvious example of that, in 2002, the Yankees and the A's, who had both played heart-stopping division series that went the distance in 2000, 2001 looked like they were on an absolute collision course in 2002 at the American League Championship Series. The Yankees had been in the previous 4 World Series and looked like they were going to make it 5 in a row easily. But the A's, if you saw the movie Moneyball, went on that wild winning streak and looked like, despite losing key players like Giambi and Johnny Damon and Jason Isringhausen, that they were going to be able to use walks and scrappy players and the can-do attitude of Billy Beane to get to the World Series past the Yankees. By the way, they also had Miguel Tejada, who won the MVP. They had 3 Cy Young Award contenders and tons of steroids, but they never mentioned that in the movie. I digress. Both were 100-win teams. Both looked like they were going to clobber their opponents. The Twins, the team that was almost retracted the year before, stumbled into the postseason because the Indians couldn't quite make it, and so in came Minnesota. And the Angels, a franchise that had never won a postseason series and were full of young players all making their postseason debut, they both looked like sacrificial lambs, and it was inevitable. The Yankees and the A's were going to have their showdown. So naturally, what was the ALCS? It was the Twins versus the Angels. Both teams pulled off upsets. And there you go. Upsets happen all the time in baseball. Heck, a few years ago, when you had that really thrilling finale to the World Series between the Kansas City Royals and the San Francisco Giants, the only World Series game I ever attended, I attended with my dad Game 3 of the 2014 World Series. Both of those teams were wild card teams. You had a World Series between 2 teams under 90 wins. Heck, the Giants were the visiting team of the wild card game, and they wound up winning the World Series. Upsets happen in baseball all the time, and more often than not, upsets happen when the pitching staffs neutralize each other. You saw great Braves teams not advance to the World Series because they had the best pitching staff over 162 games, but over a short series, a good pitching staff could match up with them. We saw yesterday McKenzie hold the Yankees to a single hit. So if you are one of the other teams that are contending in the American League, Minnesota, Cleveland, Boston, Toronto, Tampa Bay, and at this point, that's really the only 5. There's no other teams in the West that are contending. There's the outside chance, and I mentioned this in the first segment, that the White Sox could have a really good series against the Twins and maybe build themselves up. They've underachieved the first half of the season. Maybe it'll be like the Braves, that they overachieve the second half of the season. You know, the White Sox have a ton of talent on that team. They're a good team. And, you know, I never was crazy about hiring La Russa to be the manager of this team, and I've seen nothing this year that proves that to be wrong. That being said, he is a Hall of Fame manager, and he's not an idiot. So there is a possibility the White Sox could join that. Either way, the trading blocks that are out there, you have a couple players, Frankie Montas, for example, of the A's, who is, you know, he's having a good year. He's had a couple spectacular games. His ERA is around 3.2 something. He's got 71 strikeouts and 64 and 2/3 innings. If you put him into, you know, and if you put him into your rotation and you have him also through next year, the A's can get anything through the nose to get him. But if you are any of the teams I just mentioned, and you can add a Frankie Montas, then you know that if you somehow climb up to match up against the Yankees or match up against Houston, you may have one extra arm to get in there and to do the job. Luis Castillo, another one for the Reds. He was hurt for the first part of the season, but he's pitched pretty well since coming back. And again, keep in mind, there could be a jolt in some of these pitchers when they find themselves not playing in front of an empty stadium and playing out the string, but realize, oh, I could be a big deal. Castillo was one of them. Bumgarner, I brought him up yesterday. Now, I brought him up as a trade chip for the Twins because I think he's a perfect fit for Minnesota. But he'd be a perfect fit in any of those teams I just mentioned, especially when you're saying, I'm not asking you to be a Cy Young Award winner. I'm asking you to give us a good October. And this is someone who was every October he's ever pitched in. He's come up big. He's come up big every time. But Sully, he lost a game here or there. Sure, fine. His 2014 postseason, I put up against anybody's in history. Yeah, even him. You just thought of another pitcher, even him. Why? You could throw the great, like a great Bob Gibson or a great Sandy Koufax postseason, and they had some of the great World Series in history, but they only had to play one round. Bumgarner dominated. He threw complete game shutouts in the wild card game, in the World Series, was the MVP of the NLCS. Pitched well in the division series. He got an unlucky loss. It wasn't his fault. He had to play against Pittsburgh, who had a good team that year, Washington, who had the best record in the National League, St. Louis, who were the defending National League champions, and a Kansas City team that was a mosquito in everybody's ear. And he came out with a bullpen to close it out. One of the great performances of all time. You're not going to get that. But if you hand him the ball, if you are looking to say, all right, who are we going to get? Who can we have on our team that will stare down the Yankees or the Astros and not be afraid of the moment? You get Bumgarner. Those three pitchers, I think, could make such a gigantic difference. Just building that up. Now, there's two pitchers who are on the verge of coming back who are going to be like making midseason trades for the Mets. Max Scherzer, who, by the way, apparently he was doing a minor league rehab start. And Max Scherzer has like a Scrooge McDuck pile of money at home. He's obviously making 30 million tomatoes a year. And that's what he can find in the underneath his sofa cushion. He's got money. And normally if you're a big leaguer and you're doing a rehab start with a bunch of minor leaguers who are barely making enough money to get a hotel room, Scherzer bought everyone like earbuds or some sort of high-tech gift and then paid for a $7,000 dinner. $7,000 spread. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Well, guess what? He's coming back in a couple of days, and DeGrom evidently looked fantastic in his rehab start in the Mets organization. I don't remember which minor league team he played for. But you add DeGrom and Scherzer rested to this Mets team, and it looks like that's about to happen. Even with the Braves playing as well as they are, and the Braves look like they're absolutely going to be one of the wild card teams. But think about right now, the Mets are going to be playing pretty shortly, and they, despite the injuries, despite the great run by Atlanta and an underrated run by Philadelphia, despite all of that, the Mets are still up 4 games in the loss column over an excellent Braves team. Despite all that, the Mets would have a bye in the wild card round and are really only half a game behind Los Angeles for the best record in the National League. And then you add Scherzer and DeGrom. You add 2 Cy Young contenders without giving anybody up. This is why this is the Mets year. This is why the Mets here. And they made all the right moves. They made all the right repairs. And they popped the hood. And they did everything they need to do to make sure this engine was running perfectly. And if you've listened to this show, you know that means I'm going to talk about rockauto.com with the ever-increasing number of makes and models. It's impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questions and wait for the person behind the counter to go on the computer and just get the parts they usually get instead of the one you ask for when you have access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket? You can save time and money when using Rock Auto. It's a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low and for every customer. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution for your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck and write Locked On in their How Did You Hear Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need are at rockauto.com. I'm going to just bring just one thing up right now. A couple of things. I'm doing a little bit of house cleaning right now. I got a angry message from a listener. I'm not going to say the person's name because it wasn't a tweet and it wasn't on. It wasn't like an Instagram comment. And so, with that in mind, it wasn't a public comment, so I'm not going to say this person's name. But they were not happy with the fact that I brought up my displeasure that Tanner Houck did not go up to the Toronto series, and Duran, for that matter, as well, making the Red Sox bullpen depleted, and the Red Sox wound up losing one game because of their thin bullpen and nearly lost another one. The poor schmuck they had on the mound, I think it was Strom, they had him pitching like 2 or 3 innings, and he was gassed by the end. And it would be a good time to bring in Tanner Houck. And this person was talking about lots of F-bombs were said my way. And they didn't like the fact that I used talking about vaccines going into a Rock Auto ad. That's a little humor on my part. And said that he was mad that I got political. Well, and told me to stick to baseball. Well, as I said in the segment, this isn't political. Okay, I'm not a biologist, but I do not believe that a single virus in history has ever checked who you voted for if they got into you. I know people on the left and the right who have gotten the pandemic and gotten the virus, and you know what? It doesn't care who you voted for. Doesn't care what you believe. But he said to stick to baseball. And I said, I was. My problem with it was the idea that the team was worse. The team was weaker because of this. And I also brought up the idea, what happens if there's a wild card series between the Red Sox and the Jays? Are they not going to bring up the whole team to Toronto? The thing that I made a sly reference to this the other day, but he said, F off with your vaccine mandate and players being selfish for not wanting to put that blank in their bodies. The steroid era must really be over, because it wasn't that long ago that Major League Baseball players had no problems with injections. And they weren't really doing the greatest, let's just say, fact-checking about what they were doing, at least according to them. You can't say that, I'm afraid to get a shot, I don't know what's in the thing, when we're just several years removed from guys in the bathroom stall getting an injection in their butt from A-Rod's cousin, okay? The whole ball players don't want stuff injected to them unless they know what it is argument. You know what? I'm not buying that one in the slightest. In the slightest. If you got mad at me, fine, get mad at me. But please, please, please. I think that's a little egg on your face. That's a little egg on your face. You could have your beliefs, but beliefs don't mean that you are impervious from criticism. It's kind of like those players from the Rays who did not want to participate in Pride Night. They can have their opinion, and I can still call them knuckleheads. But it shows something, though. And I'm going to be positive about something. Very positive. And if you have a problem with this here, then you got to look deep into the mirror. There is a spectrum of sexuality. That's just a fact. And there have been many, many players in baseball history, more than you know, who have been all over that spectrum. There are players in the Baseball Hall of Fame who are all over that spectrum. I don't know which ones, because this is always something to be put in secret. Unlike someone's race, this is something that could be hidden. But the fact of the matter is, the odds just know that not every person is on the exact same point of the spectrum. And it's called a spectrum because it's not stonk right down the middle. You could feel this, you can feel that, and whatever you feel, it's fine. It's a personal feeling. You know, I'm attracted to women. I can't deny when I saw Brad Pitt take his shirt off and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I'm like, oh, gee whiz, yikes. It's a spectrum. And when you've had this many people up and down the spectrum in reality, some of them are going to be baseball players. And we know there have been a few who have been public. Billy Beane, not the GM for the A's, but the other Billy Beane, has come out. We all know Glenn Burke came out. I remember did work on an ESPN2 show, and I met a couple of basketball players when I was working there. And some of them just kind of shrugged. Yeah, there's lots of gay players in the NBA. And they rattled off 3 or 4 right off the top of their head. And they rattled off a famous NBA legend and his teammate who they kept being moved from team to team together. He said, yeah, they were in love. Everyone knew that. The players were like, they didn't care because the players helped them win. So I like the fact that there were pride nights all around baseball. I'm honored the fact that Erin Dolan, my friend, who organized with her husband, Sean Doolittle, organized the first pride night with the A's several years ago. It was slightly controversial then, but you're starting to see it more now. Starting to see it more on the hats now. And the reason why that's necessary is because the opposite of pride is shame. And a lot of people have been shamed into not being public and admitting who they are. And we want to have a country, right, where we're all free. That's what we celebrate on the 4th. That we're all free. We can be who we want. Don't tell me who we want. For what I'm doing is what I want. It's not hurting anyone. That's called freedom. And if you don't agree with that, fine. There's things I don't agree with. I don't agree that we need another Spider-Man movie. I don't agree that you need to have a gun in your house. But you have the right to a Spider-Man movie. You have the right to a gun in your house. Doesn't mean I have to agree with it, but we have the freedom to do that. And I have the freedom to say that. You have the freedom to disagree with me. And this guy has the freedom to send me the Instagram message. That's what it's about. But remember, this is an environment, especially in the sporting world. Even today, there are no out players. There are plenty of players up and down the spectrum. But just none of them are being up and to admit it. And the default is to still assume everyone is right, stonk, you're a heterosexual. Talk about players' wives. Do they have a girlfriend? Are they groupies? The kiss cam is always two, a man and a woman. If it's 2 men, that gets a big laugh. That those guys from the Rays think that they're comfortable enough to say, we don't accept this. That's why the night is necessary, because baseball can be the great equalizer. Those players on the Rays probably wouldn't come out now and say, I don't want to wear number 42 on Jackie Robinson Day. That's just my opinion. They would probably look up and say, yeah, I probably, that's an opinion I got to think about, because it's been demonstrated that it doesn't matter what race you are as long as you play well. Sports can be the great equalizer. It didn't matter. Fans at first who booed Hank Greenberg for being Jewish eventually embraced him. Fans who made fun of Roberto Clemente, basically calling him dumb because he couldn't speak English, realized that not only was he a great talent, but his baseball intelligence was off the charts. And suddenly the press, who were so hesitant to dub Clemente the leader of that team because not only was he not white, he couldn't even speak English, realized, wait a minute, this guy is the leader of the team. And suddenly you realize, oh, you don't even have to be someone from our country who was a native English speaker to be the leader of the club. And then even as recently, players from Japan can't be position players. That was as recently as the 90s. In comes Ichiro. In comes Hideki Matsui. In comes Shohei Ohtani. And so one of the great equalizers is, in the end, you want to see your team play well and win. It doesn't matter what race they are, doesn't matter what nationality they are, doesn't matter what their language is, doesn't matter what their religion is. And sometimes that kickstarts people thinking, if I can be okay with Jackie Robinson, maybe da-da-da. And also, conversely, representation. Oh, there's someone who looks like me or thinks like me or has grown up like me. That's someone I could look to. Representation is very important. The people who have always had representation their whole lives are always the ones that say, what does it matter? You've never had to worry about it. And now comes, someone will be out. We will have an out Trout. That just came accidentally. We will have an out Mookie Betts. I'm saying I'm not applying anything on their sexuality because I don't know. But someone will come out, play, be a superstar. I can't believe we still have to climb this hill. And this will become, as Branch Rickey said about the integration of baseball, we will look back upon this with incredulity. Why was this even an issue? So a guy's attracted to another guy. Of course, it's part of the locker room mentality. I saw it. I played, sports in high school. I know that calling someone somewhere on the spectrum, whatever derogatory term, it becomes an insult. It becomes the worst thing you can call somebody. We're moving away from that. Good. The opposite of pride is shame. Let's remove the shame. And I'm glad that more teams than not are doing this. I'm glad that you can count the people who are publicly going up against it are just a handful of people instead of it being a big controversy like it was just a few years ago. And there are people who may not accept that lifestyle or this, that, or the other thing. I may not accept someone's religion as being something that I adhere to or agree with their tenets, but I respect their belief, their right to follow that religion. And I grew up a big Boston Red Sox fan. Curt Schilling was the opposite of virtually anything that I believe in, politically, spiritually, anything like that. And I cheered like hell for him in 2004 and 2007 because I wanted him to lead my team to victory. He was a conservative Christian. I'm not. And in the end, he was on a team where you had Pedro Martinez, you had Manny Ramirez. Later, when he was on the 2007 team, you had Daisuke Matsuzaka, and then you had several players from all across the wide spectrum of places you could live in on the planet Earth. In the end, it doesn't matter. Baseball, at its best, has led the way. Led the way to show acceptance of people of different races, nationalities, and faiths, and showing representation of those different nations, nationalities, and races. I know I said nationalities twice there. It can lead the way here as well. And I think it's starting to. And someone will eventually come out, and they'll probably get some guff for it and everything like that. But I think we're in a world now that is a little more understanding to it, certainly more than was 20 years ago or 30 years ago. The Pride Night, I think, is a positive step. What we should be celebrating on the 4th of July is a nation that's built upon being the best person you can be, having individual freedoms, and also improving. There's a great line in the musical 1776 where Benjamin Franklin said, what will people in the future think we were? We were demigods? We're just ordinary men. And he's right. And that's one of the reasons why I admire the Founding Fathers, is they were flawed men. And they set up a government, and they set up a country that can adapt. That can adapt their constitution, can adapt their laws to a changing mindset and a changing world. These were not commandments brought on high. It was a constitution capable of being amended. And that's pretty forward thinking. And so that's where we should be moving towards. a country where no matter what nationality, no matter what race, no matter what the sexual orientation is, we all have the same goal, and that is to see a team beat the Yankees or the Astros in the ALCS. So we're going to have a couple of interesting guests coming on this week. We're going to have Lauren Campbell of Locked On Red Sox is going to be coming aboard. And I'm also going to bring my good friend Ruth Capulis, who has been a guest before. We're going to be talking about the Blue Jays. And we're going to get some other interesting guests coming on here. So, one last thing to talk about. Thanks so much for making Locked On MLB your first listen. Now, let's your second listen be Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia. He's going deep in the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and wherever you get your podcasts. And maybe he could have some ideas of what players some of these teams might be able to send to get Luis Castillo, to get Frankie Montas, or to get Madison Bumgarner. This has been Locked On MLB for the 4th of July, 2022. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.